Now, here's the thing, right? It's rare, and I need all your computers put away, put all your notes away. Everybody listen to this. It'll be recorded, so if you missed anything, you can go back and listen to it. But I think it's a pivotal lecture, and especially at the beginning here, I'm going to give you a meter, to start thinking about some of your future essays. Okay, so this is really kind of an important introduction to this whole thing. So let's share the screen. And we're going to go and talk about Bob Woodward. Now, who is Bob Woodward that any of us should care? Well, because I'm recording this, I won't wait for an answer. But the point is, this man is the most respected journalist in American history, replacing people like Walter Cronkite, Upton Sinclair, who you know about. But how did he get here? Here's a picture of him with his colleague Bernstein, who's Carl Bernstein, who's also really important to this story, and you'll hear more about him later. But this guy right here is a young reporter. These two refused to give up on a story that everybody quit covering because they just thought there was nothing there. But they were relentless, and they exposed the lies of what president? Now, I will take a hand on this one. Yes, it was Nixon. That's a long time ago, right? We're talking this 1970s here. So now an aging Bob Woodward, what's he doing today? Well, after the Watergate thing, he became an author and became, quite honestly, the most important, significant first draft historian of every president since. He's written a classic book on every president, several of them in volumes, right? George W. Bush, he was rough on him. He's rough on Obama. He's kind of rough on everybody. He just basically gets in there, finds out what was really going on, and then lets you know what really happened. And his credibility, well, it's, what's the right word? Impeccable? His credibility is so high that even a person like President Trump wants to talk to him because it's Bob Woodward. All right, so now let's drop back. And again, I got a few people, not paying attention. I wish you would, but here's the thing. We're 52 days out from the election. And actually, despite the problems in the economy and the coronavirus, whatever, it looks like Trump's got a shot to win, not just a shot, but a real shot. Now, this map is the map taking of all the polling, 52 days out. Biden looks to have 269, but it's not as strong as it looks. The truth of the matter is, all these states in gray, Trump is leading in. Now, Trump is never going to win the presidency, not the first time, not the second time, with a majority of the popular vote. He will be one of 5 presidents in history that'll go down in history as winning the presidency, but not winning the popular vote of the people. Because we don't elect presidents that way. We elect presidents through the thing called the Electoral College. So even if you win Pennsylvania by 1 vote and lose California by 3 million, okay, you still only get 53 votes here and you can win all 20 here. And that's really how the game is played. You have to win electoral votes. So Trump looks like he's got a good path. And this is actually from the time period. This is from the lecture at that moment. And I looked at his poll numbers and he was down like 43, whatever. But I explained to the students, that's really not that bad because basically some of your own supporters, right, wanting you to do more, right? So they may not be happy with you right now, but they're going to vote for you. So what Trump is looking for is a bounce. Now, there's only 3 ways a bounce can go. It can go steady along the line you're on, or it can bump you way up, which often happens. At the end of election, usually in the last 30 days, there's often this shift, right? One way or the other. It's pretty interesting to watch it happen. Or it could go the other way. So we're looking at this, and of course, you know what the essay was. You predict, right? You get to predict. So it was a great essay, and I gave him this too to work with because the former president had, how should I say it in a polite way, a different relationship with facts. Look, he came from business, and like anything said about you is good advertising for your brand, right? The thing is to be in the news, whether it's good news or bad news. So he'd throw out these tweets and everything else just to get everybody talking about him. And whether it was true or not was pretty much irrelevant. It was, they're talking about me. And that he's consuming the oxygen in the air, not leaving any time for Biden to make his case or anybody else. And that's how he won the first time. He just took the oxygen out of the room because all the conversations were about him, creating outrage about something he tweeted. Nobody was talking about his opponents and what they plan to do. They were still talking about him. And it worked like a charm, and he got elected the first time around. Won the nomination for the Republicans over 16 other candidates by splitting the vote. In those early primaries, he only got like 35%, but that's enough to get the nomination. So we go back to Jefferson's truthometer. Now, here's the thing with the truthometer. Politics is rough. And everybody that looked at the last two elections are going, wow, that was terrible. It was the worst ever. It wasn't the worst ever. It was so much more toxic, if you want to call it that, between Hamilton's Federalist Party and Jefferson's party. I mean, they were just relentless. They would lie deliberately about Jefferson. They would lie deliberately about Hamilton, especially, and the Federalists and John Adams. And so Jefferson says, you know, look, can you always know the truth? No, and you're in that world, right, where you can't always know the truth. And so here's the thing he hits. So there's facts. There are facts. There are facts. We have lost 680,000 people to the coronavirus. That's a fact. If anything, it's underreported. Because early on, people were classifying things, died of pneumonia, but it was COVID that caused the pneumonia. So early on, people are kind of, and some countries are even hiding the numbers a little bit to make it look better than it actually is. State of New York was found to be guilty of that. But the facts are the facts. We've lost a lot of people. But then there's this realm called plausibility. Is it plausible? You can't know all the facts all the time, but is it reasonable to believe, very likely, or probable? Right? Love that term. It's great. On the other side, leading toward it's a lie, it's a hoax, it's fake news, it's all a lie, is possible. Even though it doesn't seem likely, it's plausible, it's not, you don't have any facts to back it up. Is it possible? But it does seem unlikely. And so Jefferson said, then there are just things that are just flat out lies. It's a hoax, fake news. Well, I often conduct the class along this. I will throw out possible things. I'll throw out complete hoaxes. I'll throw out plausibility and throw in some facts too. Why? To get you to think. So this is kind of important. And by the way, politicians play this too. Sometimes they'll say things, but it's possible, and present it if it's fact, or it's plausible, presented as a fact. So it's kind of important to know that. All right, so here comes Bob Woodward then. And Bob Woodward, who had become not just famous, but like the greatest journalist in American history, wrote a book about President Trump just before the election, of basically chronicles a year and a half in each presidency. And this book was called Rage. And it comes out just prior to the election. And this is when I asked the students, is this a tipping point moment? Will this book be a tipping point? And had them decide. Well, here's the reporting. Bob Woodward, I don't know if you know the story of Nixon, but it was tapes he made of his own conversations in the White House that brought him down. What's ironic is President Trump actually called Woodward. They did 18 interviews on the record being recorded. Woodward's not going to put anything in his book he can't, that's off the record, or that he hasn't recorded and has a primary source on, in which the president in February of that year, before any of us had even heard the word coronavirus, when the idea of COVID-19 was like one little city in Wuhan, China, in February, before any of us, even not one American had yet died from it, we didn't even know if we had cases here. The president, who gets the presidential daily what? Knew all about it. He'd been briefed on it. He knew how bad it was, and he knew something that we didn't know when we shut down school. We were still, using the sanitizer and all that. Still a good plan, still good to do. Wiping off all the desks, because a lot of things are shared, through touch. When word came out of Germany that it was airborne, it sent a shudder down my spine. But that was months later. The president knew. What did the president know and when did he know it? In early February. And chose to try to keep the economy going. It's the economy. Because with a failing economy, what's his chances of getting reelected? So this is the now famous interview that came out just prior to the election. And for many of my students, they thought it was the tipping point moment in the election. I think there was one other, and that was the debate. But let's go ahead and look at this. Oh, let me back up here. Okay, let's see.
We're going to begin tonight with breaking news. Dramatic recordings of President Trump in February, privately acknowledging he knew the coronavirus could be transmitted through the air and was 5 times more deadly than the flu, even as he was publicly saying it wasn't. The blockbuster recordings are just some of the revelations in the new book, Rage, by Bob Woodward, which contradict the president's statements to the American people and tonight are threatening to upend his re-election campaign. Now, Woodward, the legendary journalist who broke the Watergate story, says President Trump cooperated with his reporting during 18 on-the-record interviews between December and July. But tonight, the president is calling the book a political hit job and saying he only downplayed the danger from the virus because he didn't want to create a panic, while his rival Joe Biden is calling the decision to withhold information a life and death betrayal of the American people. Now, as we come on the air tonight, the coronavirus has killed more than 190,000 here in the US, and there have been more than 6.3 million confirmed cases nationwide. So as you can see, there's a lot of reporting to get to tonight, including Bob Woodward's first interview about this new book with 60 Minutes. But we're going to begin tonight at the White House, where CBS's Ben Tracy is going to lead up our coverage. Good evening, Ben.
Nora, good evening. The White House is in full-on damage control mode tonight after these revelations about what the president knew and what he told the American people. And it's all on tape. President Trump told Bob Woodward on February 7th, before any known American deaths from the virus, that he knew COVID-19 was airborne and a deadly threat.
You just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff.
3 weeks later, President Trump told the American people a totally different story.
It's a little like the regular flu that we have flu shots for. And we'll essentially have a flu shot for this in a fairly quick manner.
Then on March 19th, with nearly 200 Americans dead, the president admitted to Woodward in audio obtained by the Washington Post that he deliberately misled the country about the danger.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
Sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
Stay calm. It will go away. You know it is going away.
The president knew in early February the virus was highly contagious. But on March 31st, with more than 5,000 Americans dead, he defended himself this way.
I think the one thing nobody really knew about this virus was how contagious it was. It's so incredibly contagious, and nobody knew that.
Today, President Trump claimed he was just being a good leader by not creating fear.
And certainly I'm not going to drive this country or the world into a frenzy. We want to show confidence. We want to show strength. We want to show strength as a nation. And that's what I've done, and we've done very well.
The bombshell book titled Rage, published by Simon & Schuster, a division of Viacom CBS, is based in part on 18 on-the-record interviews the legendary journalist conducted with the president between December and July, apparently recorded with his knowledge. Woodward also writes that Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, called President Trump's leadership rudderless, said his attention span is like a minus number, and his sole purpose is to get reelected. Today, Fauci said he doesn't remember saying any of that.
You should ask others. I don't recall that at all.
And Ben joins us now from the White House. And what are we learning about what the president said about some of the generals in his administration?
Well, Nora, the book says that the president called top U.S. military leaders weak and said they were too concerned about our relationship with our allies And during the time when President Trump was threatening to attack North Korea, the book says that General James Mattis, his first Secretary of Defense, went to the National Cathedral several times to pray for the nation under President Trump's command. The book also reveals that later on, after those two summits that President Trump and Kim Jong-un had, they started exchanging letters, that President Trump was flattered that Kim Jong-un referred to him as Your Excellency.
Well, okay. Now, let's go back to what the assignment was. So we just went back and asked the students to go back and use the plausimeter, right? And to write an essay. Is this a tipping point? And by the way, you can only tell if it's a tipping point a few weeks later when the polls start to reflect a shift. And so that was a great predictive essay. It was great fun. The students had a good time writing it. But we were all, of course, very worried about the coronavirus, as you can tell. Now, here is a senator, very important today, Joe Manchin. This is a senator I want you to get to know because he's really critical to the success or failure of the Biden presidency. He's Joe Manchin. He's a Democrat from West Virginia. Really critical right now. Probably the most important senator in the Senate. Joe Manchin tells of the president's comments to reporter Casey Hunt at Real Bob Woodward, "I don't know how the president can survive this. I don't know how he can." Where he knew for, by the way, they call it the lost 2 weeks, where they should have shut down the border. We should have done containment, and especially in New York. All that was slow getting started, and then it spread. Well, he didn't survive it. The truth of the matter is he got shellacked, to use a term that he used, because, by the way, the number of electoral votes that he got against Hillary Clinton was 306, and he loses by that exact same amount 4 years later. So Biden wins 306 electoral votes. And oh, by the way, Trump's 74 million right here, 74 million is the highest vote count for any president in American history, except that Biden got 81 million. It was the biggest election in American history for over 100 years in terms of turnout. It was a massive turnout across the country. And the president lost in states that nobody thought he would lose: Georgia, Arizona, and so on. Well, that leads us to the Watergate story, with an introduction of Bob Woodward being so quintessentially tied to the DNA of our politics. He just came out with a new book called Peril, and I'm in the middle of it. And it's the contest between Biden and Trump for the presidency and everything that happened after the election and so on. It's a really compelling book. And so we'll get into that more at the end of this lecture. But in order for you to understand Bob Woodward, we have to tell the story of Richard Nixon, which we'll do tomorrow. Okay, so let's pause it right there. That's the introduction. And what we're going to do for everybody, let's go ahead and just stop the share, stop the video, and end this so that you guys can spend the rest of the time studying. Okay, now again, the whole point, I don't want you messing around doing something else. If you finish 4, you can do whatever you want. If you haven't finished 4, get busy. We're trying to give you some space and time for your other classes, and too many of you are pulling B's and C's when you should be pulling A's and B's. Okay, so let's get busy. Let's take the pressure off of this class, and let's get those other classes. Let's get your time spent where you need to spend it. Okay, so let's get started.